What's up guys, Human here, and welcome back to yet another video. I'm on a roll this week. So today I wanted to go back a bit in time and combine a few subjects that I wanted to talk about into one topic, because I created this channel really for myself to try and get out a lot of the information that I've learned, as well as to express myself and get over a lot of the anxiety of talking about my past and my history. And today I'm going to combine three topics. That is my origin story. I'm going to be talking a bit more about that, about my depression and suicide and stuff, as well as the autism and a few of the health protocols, because I really went through the mill when it terms of finding a solution to my issues and finding out why I was autistic and why I had depression and anxiety and stuff. And part of that long journey was to go through the pharmaceutical route. That's to take all the antidepressants, all the antipsychotics and stuff. And I tell you, did I have a journey. It was interesting, it was horrifying, it was a massive learning experience. And I've seen so many other people go through it as well, but I'd like to just share my own story and just give a bit of advice. So this is actually a preface to a video that I'm making that should be out later on today, about how to boost your mood and improve just your energy levels naturally. That should be coming out later today. So, back in the day, I used to be totally nuts. I used to have anxiety, I used to have depression, I used to have every problem under the sun. I was also heavily autistic, communication problems and difficulties. But before I really went down the whole natural health route, I started to do the same thing that everyone else does when they basically go into that whole system, or by what they do for someone that they love or care about. When they see that there's something wrong, is that they'll go to the GP. Now, the GP, bless them, they don't know everything in the world. They usually, what they do is they will say, okay, well, you feel depressed, whatever, alright, take this pill. And that's where it started. Take this pill. And this pill for me, my first ever pharmaceutical, was citalopram. For those of you that don't know, citalopram is a very popular antidepressant used to combat mood issues like depression and anxiety. And back then I didn't know anything, so I was like, yeah, thanks doc, went home, started taking it, and that was the beginning of a whole journey. Oh wow. So this was before I actually even discovered psychiatry, and before I did any research. That was like when I first started trying to figure out what my own problems were, so naturally I went to the GP. And it started to work. I went home, I felt happy for a bit, but that was it. I just felt happy. But it wasn't the kind of normal happiness. It was like a really unclean happiness. It was like someone stapling a smile to my face. It was like being on drugs. There's no difference. It's like I haven't solved the issue. I can still feel my anxiety and my depression. My communication issues aren't going away. But I just feel happy all the time. Yay! And having a past in my past before then, and even during that time, I was abusing a lot of substances like uppers, downers, ecstasy. The list goes on. Luckily, that's all in my past now, where it should be kept. And I realized that this is no different from taking MDMA. This is no different. I am just covering up my problems with happiness, with excessive happiness. I just went to my room, I just looked in the mirror, and I just looked at myself, and my eyes were wide, my pupils are dilated, and I just said, I'm rushing. I'm rushing. And rushing is a technical term for when you're on this stuff. You don't need to know. But it's like this wasn't really solving any issues. And back then I thought to myself, so I went back to the doctor and I said, look doc, my problems are still here. What can you do? And so he said, well, this is a bit out of my depth, and he sent me to a psychiatrist. And just breaking away a bit more into my origin story, that was back when I started to go to a psychiatrist, and that's when my parents started to get involved, and that was the beginning of the end for me. I'll get into that later on. But I went to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist did the same thing as a GP, sat me down and said, well, you got this problem, alright, have you tried this? Alright, fine, let's try an antipsychotic. So I started on an antipsychotic, this one called olanzapine. And I felt like a zombie, but I felt like a happy zombie. So not only was I rushing, but I was also dead inside, which was pretty useful if you want to work at, I don't know, Walmart or somewhere. But in terms of, being 15, 16, 17 at the time, you've got a big future ahead of you, and you're thinking to yourself, I still can't communicate, but now I'm happily dead. So I'm like a unicorn zombie. Look at me go. And it was like, it was so strange. And I was on this for a while, and I remember thinking to myself, like, look, like, this isn't working for me. Like, I still have my communication problems. I still have random bouts of anxiety and depression. I still have, my body is still shutting down in terms of, it's still like breaking down slowly. I still have joint pain and insomnia and all this other stuff. And I was having more symptoms on that as well. I was getting these weird nervous tics and tremors, and I'd wake up in the night in like cold sweats, and all this other stuff would start to happen to me. So I went back to the doctor, and that was when I started to discover the whole natural health route. So I started to ask the psychiatrist, like, look, I've been doing some research, and I've heard that actually heavy metal toxicity might be an issue, and it's causing some of my problems and stuff, and you know, maybe it might be my diet and stuff, because I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know that nutritionists existed. Well, or maybe I did, but I can't remember. And I remember that the psychiatrist just sort of looked at me like, what? Like, he had no idea. Like, what is this? Like, natural health, diet, and lifestyle? I'm going to move this down a bit, because, yeah. You know, natural health, diet, and lifestyle. Like, he had no clue. He didn't know. And so I started to get a bit skeptical. I sort of asked, okay then doc, if you don't know about that, then can you tell me more about this medication? And they had given me this explanation about how it's about a chemical imbalance. A chemical imbalance in your brain, which, duh. And second of all, is that it? Like, can you give me any more information? I remember I started to grill him about, okay, where is this in the brain? Why do I have this chemical imbalance? What's causing it? He couldn't answer me the question, and he kept on dodging and evading, and he hooked me up on another medication, and eventually I was on like 4 or 5 different medications. And I remember just getting more and more frustrated. So this is why it turns a bit of a turn for the worse, and where the whole darker side of my past goes in. Whereby my parents were sociopaths, narcissists, and all sorts of other stuff, which I'll get into later on. And they were basically, when I started talking about the natural health stuff, they freaked out, and they basically denied me any sort of access or healthcare because it wasn't on the NHS, to basically help me investigate and go down this line, which was actually the successful way that I got rid of my issues. Now, back then, I was very vulnerable. I was messed up in 101 different ways. I couldn't maintain a job, so I was trapped. Not only was I trapped, but I was being forced to take all this medication by my parents, who basically didn't want to face the fact that actually I knew about my issues because of their own stuff, which I'll be getting into later on. So they're basically denying me access to the proper treatment and healthcare, and I couldn't do anything at the time because I was 101 different kinds of messed up, but I still kept trying. And so after a while, I basically said, look, enough is enough. And it was around about the time that I was staying in this place called the Priory. And the Priory, for those of you that don't know, is a very prominent it's a line of mental health institutions, and they have big buildings where they charge through the nose for people to get hooked up on all sorts of medications. You have people going there, mainly middle upper class. It costs a crap load of money to go there, and it was a sad sight to see. The main benefit I got was to be in an environment where there were people who wanted to listen to you, and there were people who were in an environment where everyone wanted to get better. That did better. That did a huge world of good for me. But they were all zombies. Like, half of them were zombies. No one was getting better. There were people in there that had been there for like 7 years. Like 7 years. Paying like anywhere between £500 to £1,000 a week. A week. A week. Just to stay there and get pumped through all this medication. And I wasn't seeing any improvement. I wasn't seeing anyone get any better. And I remember walking out of that experience, like, how can you be in some sort of an institution whereby they'll pump you through all this medication, and you can honestly believe their misconceptions, I should say, about how it's a chemical imbalance. And one of the defining moments for me when I was there was that when I was trying to say, look, I want to get off the medication, and I was being forced to take it by the doctor and by my parents. And they said, my psychiatrist tried to scare me by saying that if I didn't get off of this medication, I would be permanently messed up. Like, permanently messed up. She actually tried to convince me that this chemical imbalance in my brain would become permanent if I did not keep taking this medication. Now, I was paying, well, my parents were paying £1,000 a week for me to be there. I was there for 2 weeks. And here's the doctor sitting there and telling me that unless I keep taking the medication, I'm going to be permanently depressed and anxious. That was like a huge, like, what the hell to me. This is a money-making scheme. And I ran. I refused to turn up I refused to take the medications. It caused all sorts of trouble at home. I got kicked out of my house. I was homeless for a period of time. That was a dark period of time with me. But I was like, look, not only was my body basically telling me, look, you're going to die if you stay on this medication, but every single fiber in my body was telling me that, like, one, my parents had messed up because they were denying me care. Two, I was going to die if I did not figure out what the hell was wrong with me. And three, everything, all this psychiatrist stuff is nonsense. So that was my experience with psychotropics and that whole sort of thing. Now, as to how I felt, like I said, I felt like just a really happy zombie. I didn't feel as if anything was getting better. But the silver lining, I think, is that I only later on learned that only in small dosages and only certain times and situations and under the proper care can psychiatrists and can psychotropic medications and all sorts of other stuff actually work. Now, I do know a lot of people who have been experiencing benefits. This is not to knock on to those people, but for me and for thousands of millions of other people who are hooked on this medication, which is given out like hotcakes to people, it's just making it worse for them. Not only that, but these doctors, they're not giving them the proper information to how to actually get rid of all these different emotional issues. They're not telling them the different routes that you can go to. They're not showing them the different ways that you can really improve. And there are people locked in this crazy cycle of going from doctor to doctor, especially kids with autism or kids who can't find the proper care. They're hooked on this and they can't get out. They're stuck. They can't get out. And one of my aims is to try and just show people or parents that, look, man, like, if your kid's been on this medication for 3 years and they're still messed up, the medication is probably the thing that's making them messed up, But anyway, that's been my brief experience with it. I may continue talking about it in a future video, but I've already talked for 12 minutes. And I do have a video coming out later on about how to basically do all this stuff naturally. It's only going to be like 7 supplements and stuff, but I just wanted to share a bit of my origin story. As well as talk about the crazy life that I went through. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Peace out.